Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. How wonderful to see all of you here this afternoon. I've spent quite a bit of time up in the galleries, and it's been quite remarkable to see so many people there and to see how all of you have engaged with the works and how many of you have had photographs taken of yourselves and put your narrative to those photographs and put them on the walls. So thank you to all of you for coming. I'd also like to thank all of our artists and performers who've been with us this afternoon, that have given us such a vibrant afternoon so far. I'd also like to thank our members and our supporters. We can't do the important work that we do without all of you. It's because of your belief in us and your faith in our mission that we're able to do the important work that we do. So thank you very, very much. Those of you that will have gone up to the exhibition, have seen it, will know just how thrilling, how deeply affecting, and for me, how extraordinarily filled with joy and optimism that exhibition has been. And I'm sure those of you who've been there have felt that, and those of you who haven't been there yet will feel something of that. We've been so lucky over the years, Janam has been so lucky to have had a long and very cherished relationship with Kip. He's an artist, he's an author, he's an educator, and he's an extraordinary activist. The museum has believed in Kip's work since the very beginning. We've believed not just in him as an artist, but we've also believed in the transformative power and the impact of his work. And we've been very, very privileged to have gone along with him on that journey. So Kip created the Hapa Project in 2001, and he traveled the country and he photographed over 1,200 volunteers who identified as Hapa. And amongst the goals of the Hapa Project were so many of the goals that we hold dear at the museum, which was why it was so important for us to be involved in this project from the very beginning. So amongst the goals of the project were that it was to promote awareness and recognition of the millions of Hapas who live in the US, give voice to multiracial people and other previously ignored ethnic groups, and to foster a positive identity formation in multiracial children. And we first featured those photographs from his Hapa Project in 2006. Many of you here will remember that first exhibition, called Kip Fulbeck, Part Asian, 100% Hapa, remains to this day one of the most popular shows that we've ever presented. And then Kip was back at Janam in 2010 with mixed portraits of multiracial kids. And in that exhibition, he focused solely on young people. And then we've also worked with Kip in an entirely different capacity. We worked with him in 2014 when he designed and photographed Perseverance, Japanese tattoo traditions in a modern world, which was a very, very different topic and a very, very different presentation of images, but it was also enormously popular at Janam. And that exhibition traveled throughout the US, went to Australia, and it went to New Zealand. So today, this weekend, brings us back full circle with Kip and the Hapa Project. Those of us that have been here have seen it come to life in the galleries. We've seen those extraordinary koi being painted on the walls by Kip and his students and his volunteers, but also just have seen those images go up and have seen how that gallery has come to life with those faces, with those presences, with those identities, and with those extraordinarily touching stories. So what he's done, which has also been such a wonderful way of bringing it back, is to go back to many of those girls and boys and men and women of that first exhibition and rephotograph them. And those individuals have written new statements in response to that same question, what are you? So it's a fascinating opportunity to experience not just how the physical changes have happened for those people who photographed, but also to read between the lines of what they've written about themselves and to understand how they now view the world, and in some instances how, of course, many of them were very little, but how they view themselves differently and how they give expression to that. So you're also amongst the first to have a copy, to be able to get a copy of the catalogue. So I hope that you will, those who haven't already. At the end of this program, Kip will be on hand to sign copies of the catalogue. And those of you who've been through this before, you know the drill. The Janum store is open, and Kip has a very, very sharp and brand new Sharpie. So please, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. Be a wonderful piece to add to your collection and just to your library. Again, lastly, I tried to do this last night, but I didn't see him. You know, there are a couple of people that I wanted to thank on the Janum staff, most especially Clement Anami, whom I'm sure has probably disappeared to back of house. But Clement is our extraordinarily gifted art director and vice president of exhibitions, and he's overseen the implementation and bringing to life of this exhibition. But the mastermind, really, the person who has anchored this, who's thought this, who's dreamed it, who's brought it into reality, and who's gathered us all together today is, of course, Kip. So please, let's give him an enormous, enormous hand. Kip.
Can sit. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you guys for coming. It means a great deal. These are my assistants. This is Jack, Aaron. And this is Pepper Jane. And before we start, very important announcement. Jack has lost one of his Ultramen. So if anyone finds the Ultraman or the other Godzilla creature, let us know. We'd be very, very happy to see that. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's going on, what I did here, and I'm going to bring people up so we can have some fun, if that's cool with y'all. We're good? Okay, so anyone know what this is, by the way? So here's your secret for coming on opening day. That's just my handwriting. That's how I write the word life, sideways. So when you're in the exhibit, it says life. It says love, lost, life. And that's what it's just my calligraphy, because my kanji's pretty bad. And what this project is based on is basically, really simple things like this. This is the only picture really I have of my mom and dad, because my dad was a photographer. So it was always just my mom and me, or just me. And we have the picture where apparently my sister Jo here took that. I'm making a face, but that's where I grew up here in LA County, in Covina. And with this project, what I'm really doing is I'm making the project that this kid really wanted to have. You know, and so as much as I want to say there are these grandiose ideas behind the Hapa Project, I'm really just making the project that I wish would have existed when I was 5 or 6 years old. Because when I grew up, if you look at, my sisters and my brother, I come from an immigrant Chinese family. My mother was widowed in China, so I grew up in a Chinese household, living across 101 here in Chinatown every weekend where Chinese is spoken, and I'm the kid that doesn't get the language. I'm the one that doesn't really like the food. We even have a deal that I'd go to dim sum if we stopped at McDonald's. That was my deal. And it was fine, and we did that, and so until I'm 4, 5, 6 years old, I get it. I'm the white kid. Me and Dad are the ones that don't know how to play Mahjong and Tingao. We're the ones that don't speak. We don't get what they're talking about. We don't get the culture, et cetera. Then I go to school, and I'm at this all-white school, and the first day is this day where they say, like, I'm just once watching here. Okay. Awesome. How's this? Thanks, Jeff. So I went to school the first day, and they had this day, they said, let's go throw the Chinese guys in the trash can. And I was like, yes! Let's throw the Chinese guy in the trash can, not realizing that I'm the Chinese guy. And so identity was really formative to me early on, and especially in terms of race. And because I had this thing where every one of us has had to fill out that form, check one box, and to me, that's a really unfair question, because I had to pick mom or dad, which wasn't, it's bizarre that we had to do that. And then they added this thing where you could check other, like that's some big, milestone. You get to do the other box. And then they had the thing where you could write other, please explain. And I would just write no. And then we celebrated in 2000 when we had, we could check more than one box for the first time. But the goal was that we won't have to worry about this thing. We live in a time where, we got a guy running the country who wants to build walls, and I'm trying to break the walls down. It's a different time. And what I'm trying to do with this museum is the same thing. We're trying to get people to tell their own stories and to have validity to our stories, because maybe you're different. You go to the local Cineplex and you think that the film you see tells your story. I don't find it that way. I never get my story told. For every allegiance that I see, I've got to go through 100 just crap that doesn't do anything about what my life is. And so I'm trying so hard to get real stories, and we have an urge to tell them. And the thing that I find unifying people that are doing this project is that, everyone wants to tell a story, but we're all looking for the same stuff. Everyone is looking for, obviously, love and acceptance and belonging, but they're also, they're afraid of the same things. Everyone's afraid of every single person is afraid of being judged or not fitting in or not being part of the in crowd. And those kind of universalities are what really come through. And I feel like, in some ways, a charlatan, because I'm very proud of the work I've done, but essentially what the project is I've created a project to let you all come in and be geniuses. And you're all really good at that. And so I get the credit for it, but the credit should go to the people that are doing it, the people that are involved in it. Which brings me to the thank yous. And the first one, obviously, is to Janum. This has been my home away from home. The fact that they took a chance on a Chinese-American Hapa guy in the early 2000s who was unproven and never, ever judged me. I've been making art professionally for 30 years, and there's been one Chinese-American association that ever asked me to show my work, and that was in New York. It's just never been a thing that's ever invited me, but the Janum has always been open. And they said, look, if we don't reach out, this is what America is. If we don't reach out and talk to this audience, this is like what our mission should be. And I feel they've always gotten it. So if you are not members, then I please urge you to support the museum. We live in a time where not only does our president want to cut the NEA, they also want to give zero funding to the EPA. The Hapa Project is apolitical. I am not apolitical, okay? Okay? I think I welcome anyone and anything there, but I have a lot to say, and it is so important. When we have this guy that wants to do a Muslim ban, it was the Japanese American community that came through and said, we are all going to register as Muslims then. And tens of thousands of people did that to overwhelm the system, because you have a system based on racism and ethnocentrism this is a group of people that were incarcerated, and they understand what it's like to have your constitutional rights broken, and that's why there was this march here in Little Tokyo about the Muslim ban, and that's really what is really needed right now. So I'm so grateful to have this show at this time. So thank you to Janum, thank you to Anne for running such a great organization. John Osaki, my old friend, was my main conduit and the main program leader for this show. Elizabeth Lim created all this here that you saw, public programs. Every person, every performer you see, every booth you see, everything is based on Elizabeth. Thank you so much, Liz. Lynn Yamashita really ran all the education, so when you see all the photographs being taken, that's Lynn up there running around like crazy doing work for us. The late Karen Higa, who always intimidated me because of her intellect. She was the person who actually made the decision to bring this project here for the first time. And Lisa Sasaki was the first person who it was her first show to curate. It was my first show, and we worked out together. I want to thank UCSB, where I work, Gauchos, ole, 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 all my Gauchos that are here in the audience. Many organizations and the performers here. Mixed Marrow, if you guys don't know that. If you walk into the exhibit upstairs, one of the first images is my late friend Aaron Lee, who took one shot in early 2000s. And then later he came here and he was going through the chemo for leukemia. And he could not find a match because the idea of finding a match for stem cell or bone marrow is very, very rare for Hapas. And he came after treatment and came to a shoot here, barely able to walk, and said, I really want to do this. And he wrote how important this was, and it's really, really important. So Athena is with Mixed Marrow. Multiracial Asians of Southern California has been around forever. They are one of the first organizations to really appreciate and understand multi-ethnicity. Loving Day, founded by my dear friend Ken Tanabe, and his lovely partner Catherine Lung is over there celebrating the monumental decision of Loving versus Virginia. That's a national organization. Travis Atreo, who you just saw here perform, Erin O'Brien, who was back there doing her wonderful mixed spices, and Summer Sui Singh. Thank you guys all for being here. I want to thank my assistants. Elliot Oppenheimer is in New York because he got a real job, so he doesn't work for me for free anymore. But Joanne, where are you? Joanne, stand up, please. Joanne printed most every print you're looking at up there. Tao Nguyen was making up for all my lacks in Photoshop, which are considerable. And I want to thank a special one to Erica Kodama. Erica, where are you? Who I could not have done this project without her. She was really my right-hand person throughout the entire one, so thank you guys. The essay contributors, if you read the book, I asked people that I really, really respected and really, really loved, and I asked them to be honest and to be brave and to write without fear, and they all came through. Cindy Nakashima, Velina Hasu Houston, Kiao Naismith, and Paul Spickard. Could you guys please stand to be recognized? So these are really my original crew. Besides Paul, he was more of a mentor, but Velina, Cindy, Curtis Rooks, Erica Anderson, Reg Daniel, there's a group of us that we found each other because we were the only ones talking about this stuff back in 19... So I want to thank all the volunteers, and there are so many of you. Could you just please stand if you helped to create this, if you helped to hold a show, if you helped to paint, I know you guys are here. Come on, there's no one. Diane, stand up, Diane. Okay. Thank you, Elisa. Thank you guys so much. When I talked to Clement and he said, I want to do koi all over, he's like, well, great, we'll just get digital files and we'll print them and we'll put them up as stickers. I said, no, we're going to hand paint them. And he said, what do you, and so it took me a week to draw them, and it took 17 of us about 6 days to paint those, but I think it makes a difference that they're up there, so we spent a lot of time on that one. I want to thank my family here, obviously these two. My mother is here, she's 94, almost 95, Mom. Well, stand up, Mom. She'll get some serious props. My sisters Joe and Linda are here. Many of my family has been coming. Our au pair, Leah, is running around somewhere. My best mate, Ben Northover, is in England. Marika Gordon was our first sponsor for here. And again, Clement, who was just so wonderful. But the people that I really want to thank are the participants. If you participate in this in any iteration anyway, could you please stand? Because this is, you guys are the ones that made this thing happen. So, I mean, I really needed you guys for this, so thank you guys so much. The project is entirely based on what you guys did. So briefly, when I did this project, the same questions come up over and over, so I'll answer them quickly. The first one is, how do you find people? There was no problem finding people. I mean, for this last version, I was supposed to do 2 shoots in Los Angeles. We did 8, and every shoot filled up within an hour. As soon as we announced it, the slots were gone. There was never a shortage in LA, in San Francisco, in New York. Chicago was tough to fill. Seattle was cranking. And then the weird thing is Hawaii was hard to fill. And having lived in Kailua, I was like, how can everyone is Hapa in Hawaii? It's, you know, how can I, but I realized it's like walking onto a campus and saying, hey, who's got a backpack? Anyone have a backpack? And it's just like, what? Who cares? It's just not a big deal. So Hawaii was different. And I wanted to talk about one other thing. Is like the majority of the volunteers overwhelmingly were female, self-identified as female, at least 75%. I have my own reasons for that, and they were mostly JA. And I think one of those reasons that men are really, Andrew, where are you? Okay, that's Andrew over there. Andrew, raise your hand again. Okay, raise your hand again. Andrew dressed up as me for a final in my class. Under the idea that all Hapas look alike, and pulled it off pretty well. He even like had people bring my book and he signed them as me. The reason that not many men do this project is I think that we're really trained in idiotic ways as men in this country. We measure masculinity so bizarrely and so inappropriately. The idea of strength as masculine, and then Western strength, the idea that like, oh, he didn't cry at his father's funeral, what a strong man. No, messed up, time bomb, blow up kind of man. It's a very different thing. We measure strength like, well, he fought off the intruder, or he didn't show his emotions, or it's really ridiculous. You look at the East, and strength is measured in terms of like mastering the violin, or mastering quantum physics, or the strength to take care of an elderly parent or grandparent. That kind of strength is never sort of given accolades in the West. And so when I take the men that come to the shoots, usually they come with a partner. I'm not here, I'm here with him or her. And then later I'll ask them to take a picture. So again, take a look at Andrew over there. He's a smiling, happy guy. I said, Andrew, you want to take a picture? He said, sure. This is how Andrew took his picture the first time, okay? And the reason is because men are trained to look hard when we take pictures, which is why you look at their Facebook or Snapchat, every picture's like, because we're idiots, okay? And so Andrew was an idiot, and I asked him, can I show this? And I said, Andrew was a good friend of mine. He's a happy guy talking, he's all smiling. I said, Andrew, he goes, I said, Andrew, look like yourself, and I got this, okay? That's 10 seconds of difference from being, again, from being hard and being fake and posturing to being yourself, okay? And that's all I'm trying to do is to get the people to be themselves, and that's what the project is about, to give you guys the space to actually show yourselves as you are. So I want to bring some people up here. The first ones I want to bring up are the essay contributors. We have many doctors. So Paul Spickard, Velina Houston, and Cindy Nakashima. Could you guys come up, please? Yeah, you guys sit wherever you want, yeah. And Jeff, can we get a mic, possible mic for these guys? Cindy and I go back like into the Jurassic period. She was my first friend that got me into the Hapa thing. Velina was my idol as an artist. I watched her play T and was like, I'll never be this good of an artist. And Paul was the person who I first read his book, his Mixed Blood, which changed my life. And I thought I would ask each of them to say just a few words about what it's like being, you guys can have one, about what it's like being part of this for so long, what it's like being part of this project, and just to say hi to you guys. So would you guys mind saying something?
Thank you, everybody. And, let's see. We're on, right, okay. I wanted to just say one thing because I think it's true for all of us and probably all of you out there too, which is I want to thank all the people who came before us. Because I remember, I grew up in Kansas, okay? And when I first came to Los Angeles, Wakako Yamauchi, whose granddaughter works here at the museum, was one of the first Asian American artists to welcome me. The other one was Amy Hill, who is a writer and actress. And so, I feel that, the people who helped you, or people whose books you read, or your mentors, all of that, that's
Amy's
so
right
meaningful.
there.
So,
Amy Hill!
Amy Hill!
Sorry, Velina.
Yeah.
Excellent timing.
So that's a big thank you for all the people who come before us and help us to start expressing ourselves or living our lives.
I get this, it's good.
But it has one too.
I tell this story in my essay, but when I lived in Michigan, I grew up in Michigan, and I was born in '66, so same age as Kip, basically. And when I was in 3rd grade, I was sent by my teacher to meet another teacher, a 4th grade teacher. I lived in Michigan, everyone was white. And she asked me a bunch of questions, and I, jabbered away, and then she said, do you know why Miss Torgo sent you here? No. She goes, because my daughter, my only child, married a man from Japan, and they're going to have a baby, and I've never met someone like you before, and I've been worried. But now that I met you, I know everything's going to be okay. So this is how things were back then. So those of us who are old, this is like nirvana. This is like our biggest Hapa fantasy, right? So we have Kip to thank for that.
Thank you, Cindy. Paul Spickard?
Yeah, I'm like the only person in the room that's not mixed. And I'm the only naked person upstairs who's not mixed. And that's all a little weird. Thank you, Kip, for something that I don't think that you know that you did. You asked me to write that afterword for the first of these books, and I did, and then you said, write it again because nobody wants to read academic prose. And then I did, and then you said, no, that's too snotty, you have to calm down a little bit. So we got that done. And, but then that book went out into the world. And the show went various places, but the book went out in the world. I once ran into it in the bookstore at the Helsinki Museum of Modern Art, which is a pretty random place. But in the ensuing 3 years, 7 different people whom I had not heard from or thought about since high school, one since junior high school, that book came into their lives. One of their kids brought it into the house. They stuck with it and read it all the way through to the end. And they Google stalked me and found out where I was and contacted me to speak to the truth that you all wrote in that book and expressed with your bodies. And that's a pretty amazing, I mean, that's what art's supposed to do. Art is supposed to touch people and make them think differently or feel differently. And to make, there's a lot of silliness about crowd art, but that is the art, the genius in this work. So thank you.
Thank you. That's touching. Thank you, guys. And so I wanted to have 3 of my idols come up here before. Helen, did you stand when I asked for participants? You need to stand. Helen Toshin proofread everything, including like a gazillion of my edits that are wrong. So thank you. Another gaucho. And before I bring up the participants, we have some special guests for you guys. I did want to say that I didn't thank these 2 guys. 2016 was the roughest year of my life, not just because of the Trump thing. I just went through some stuff. And when I write in the afterward that, that as I close this project, there's no melancholy. I feel like the project has done what it's going to do, and now it's time for like the rest of you guys to go. And there's like so many younger and better artists and filmmakers out there than me, and if the project has touched them in some way, that's meaningful to me. If it inspired them in some way, that's meaningful. I don't think I would have got through that 2016 if not for these 2 guys and for that project. So in that way, it's like it gave me a purpose when I didn't really have one in life. So that was really meaningful to me. And I wanted to bring up some people here. The first one is this young lady. Taryn, are you here? Come on up. So this was Taryn 15 years ago. This is Taryn now. And I thought I would ask each of these people, and they're sort of the many people that are recognized from the first project. You want to give her a mic? And if you want to say anything about what it's like, if you've been recognized, anything you want to talk about, take a minute.
I was reading what I wrote on there on the first time 15 years ago, and it's so funny because I wrote a half a page. You want me to write what I think in a half a page about being Hapa? I feel the same way now. It's pretty... Everybody wants to fit into a category. That's just how we feel comfortable. That's how we feel secure. We want to know where we fit in. Everybody wants to fit in. I think back in my I grew up in a upper middle class Jewish community. My mom's Jewish, so I halfway fit in. My dad's Filipino and Hawaiian, didn't fit in there. But I found out when I was growing up in Florida that I'm Cuban. So that was interesting. When I moved to California, I became Mexican. When I was in New York, I was Puerto Rican. But my sophomore year in high school, we read a play called The Octoroon. Has anyone ever read that? Okay. It was the first time I ever recognized that you could be degraded or less of a person because of how ethnic you are. I never knew. I always knew I wasn't blonde. But I just figured it'll come in later. I didn't realize. But when I read this book and I was like, oh my gosh, this girl was an 8th black and she's an 8th not okay. And I was like, that's terrible. And my goal in life, as my mom knows, is to marry a half black, half Mexican guy with green eyes so I can have the most mixed child available. But later in life, my mom showed me a movie called Imitation of Life. And I was I never really grew up knowing that I was different. I never really grew up knowing that I wasn't okay. when I got into college, well, actually, back to Imitation of Life, it was the first time I noticed, again, that you can choose what you want to be, really. Like, you know, and your ethnicity can either degrade you or make you the most amazing person in life, but you decide. It's up to you to decide how great you are, and you don't depend on other people to tell you what you are. In college was when I joined the Hapa group, and I didn't know other mixed people were out there because, again, I grew up where I grew up. So in college, and I joined the group, Kip came along, and he was taking pictures of other Hapas. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome, I'm gonna meet another Hapa, like, yay! And I was so excited, and I went, and I met Kip, and he sat down, and we talked. The book came out, it was exploding. Everybody was asking about it. When I told people I couldn't be at roller derby today, it was because I had to go to this thing, and trying to explain that to a bunch of girls who just punch each other. Like, that was super interesting also. But again, I go off. Okay, so my point is, being with Kip and having the Hapa Project come to light has changed me in so many ways. Learning what it is to be Hapa and learning what it means to be okay with yourself. Learning that different shades of color are an accessory, that they are a good thing, and they are things to be embraced. And the more you embrace them, the better person you'll be, the more successful you'll be as a person. And I never would have really learned that until Kip came along and actually organized and structured it for me so I could get it. And I appreciate that.
Thank you, Terry.
You're welcome.
Where'd I shoot you? San Diego?
Huh?
San Diego? I shot you?
San Diego.
Okay.
Yes.
Next up, Dr. Greg, you're here? This is Greg Alzadi. You can sit or leave it up to you. You can sit. This is Greg 15 years ago. It looks exactly the same now. Greg, what do you have to say to the crew?
Well, I was thinking about this, and I'm going to try and keep it a little short, but
Bring the mic up.
I'm a California guy. I grew up in Sacramento and went to school in Davis and San Francisco and then San Diego, so I'm kind of a California guy. And when I grew up in Sacramento, I grew up in a nice little blue-collar neighborhood, and everybody had little cookie-cutter homes, and they had carpet, and I didn't. There were two Mexicans in the class that went through elementary school, me and Alfie Alvera. I mean, Asian derivatives like me didn't exist. So when I get to my shoot with Kip, I'm thinking my kids are going to be in there. How wonderful! They're the most beautiful kids ever. And then I end up in the book, and it causes a lot of discord in the house. My daughter, she struck a chord with where we were in the country. She was picked in a cold call in the Apple iPhone 4 rollout as the leading headshot. So if you went into an Apple store, there was a collage of 16 photos. The only solitary headshot present was my daughter. And that's because she is so ethnically ambiguous, you can't put your finger on it. And Apple figured that out. And so they were paid a lot of money to go to Mallorca and cavort, and they took all these promotional pictures, which they will not release one of to Papa, not one. But that suggested to me that the times had changed, that we were now free to be who we wanted to be. We didn't have to identify. And all these things that you're talking about, just to be yourself, is tremendous. I mean, so I'm an interventional radiologist, and nobody knows what I am. I have a Z in my name, and it starts with Al, and so that gets people really scared. People ask me, did you train in the United States? Yes, but it's a different time now, and thank God for Kip's imagination, because this is driving us forward as a culture, and I can't get enough of it. I mean, it's simply amazing. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you, sir. You may remember Teresa Hodges from the first series, who talked about, about her hair and being able to put her hair down for the first time. Teresa, can you come up, please? Anything you'd like to share with the audience?
I was thinking about this, I'm gonna do this, and what am I gonna say? I have a black and pinay tattoo, I think the one thing that I wanna say is Hapa changed my life. And, oh my goodness. And I literally mean that because, I'm a PhD student and my dissertation is on black and pinays. But my whole entire life, I think, I started with this photo talking about how I didn't feel comfortable wearing my hair down, and I didn't feel fully accepted as African American or Filipina. And now I'm like the epitome of all that it is, and I don't know, it makes me really speechless, So I really love how throughout this project and encountering all these different people, it means something different for each of us, I lived in Hawaii for 4 years doing grad school, and I was like, I'm not using the word Hapa, but so I understand for some of my friends, they have to claim their Hawaiianness for their land, and they can't claim Hapa, but then other people in Hawaii call me Hapa, so I'm like, oh no, what do I do? But I think the thing that I take away from this moment is how much it can create, the Hapa Project and that word and the understanding of what it means is what matters the most, what we all take away from it, so.
Thank you, Teresa. And think what your work is going to do for next generation. So thank you, Teresa. This is Chloe when she was, I believe, 11 years old. Chloe? You're here. They look a little different when they grow up, huh? What can you share with us, Chloe?
I guess I grew up in a very international community. I was very fortunate. My mom is Chinese and my dad is French, so I went to a really small French school in Los Feliz, if anyone knows it. And everyone there, most people there were mixed race. But to be perfectly honest, I don't think many people were Hapa. And I just remember very vividly taking this photo. And it was in someone's house.
Probably.
And I didn't really know too much what was happening. My parents just told me, like, we're gonna go and, someone's gonna take your portrait. And I walked in and everyone there was Hapa, and I sat down and I had to write, something about what it means to be Hapa. And that moment was really memorable for me. I feel like it was something that I hadn't really thought of. It didn't really hit me, I think, until that moment, because it just, I was me. So yeah, I really held on to that moment a lot, and that really meant a lot.
Thank you, Chloe. Stuart, are you here? He didn't know he was going to talk. I just saw him here, so I put his picture in. There you go. Surprise, you're on stage. No warning for you. You're good enough. And you have a really interesting story. Stuart's first one, this one, the entire statement just simply read, Queer Eurasian. And interesting story is I went to do a gig out in Atlanta at a very well-known school. And I went there, and a faculty took me aside. It was a private high school, and they said, yeah, your Hapa Project's here, but I need to talk to you about it. And I said, why? He said, well, that one statement, that Queer Eurasian one? I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's not in the show. I said, what do you mean? He's like, they took it out. And I said, no, queer's not pejorative. It's like, it's been reclaimed. He's like, no, we're not talking about the word queer. We don't use the word gay. I'm like, what? He's like, we don't use the word homosexual. We pretend it doesn't exist. And I said, what about your gay students? He goes, how about our gay faculty? And so I said, take me to the museum where it's showing, because if it's not there, I'm going to take the whole show down. We went over there, and I walked up, and there's Stuart, this Queer Eurasian. I'm like, it's right here. And the faculty goes, yeah, it's here because you're here. They'll take it down when you leave. So I naturally started my entire talk talking about gay marriage. I got a standing ovation from the students, and faculty walked out. So with that, Stuart Gaffney.
Wow, well, thank you for that, Kip. I mean, and I really mean thank you for that. That's so beautiful, and I think it really encapsulates the whole spirit of this project. And I think that for me, and something I've been talking about with many of you actually up there, is an experience that most mixed kids have is that their parents can't be their guides. Like so many other things in life, parents can tell you, well, this is what it was like for me. But this is something where the kids actually need to tell the parents, okay, this is what it's like. Let me tell you, I'm learning it by doing. And that's something that queer kids usually experience as well. So my parents were not queer or Hapa. So I had to learn. And what I've learned is that although I thought I didn't have something in common with my parents in those fundamental ways, I did, because they grew up at a time where there were laws against their marriage. In fact, my mom went to Cal during World War II, and she was a member of the Chinese Students Club, and she just remembered, like, yeah, if you fell in love with someone of a different race, you left the state. That's what you had to do. And we were having this conversation at a time where John, who's my partner of 31 years, but my husband, now legal, of 10 years, we're talking to my parents about how we might want to go to Massachusetts to get married. And that they were like, oh yeah, we've had experience like that. So something that I wrote about in the exhibit is that the most moving thing was on our wedding day, to be walked down the aisle by my mom and dad, and for them to be there to see the next generation in the family achieving marriage equality, and to feel like, wow, I actually have something really profound in common with my mom and dad. We live to see a better day. The thing that I really love about all of your work, Kip, and that I've also learned through the marriage equality movement, is the power of personal stories to create change. And people often say, well, how is it that national opinion about gay marriage flipped? Like, in like a decade, it went from 20% in favor to like 80% in favor. How did that happen? It's like we told our stories. I mean, of course, it's more complicated than that, but the reality is, like in the Prop 8 trial, what happened in that, people told their stories. And that's what's happening right upstairs. And as you've already heard, you're touching people's lives, you're actually changing people's lives. And it's the power of that personal story. So I'm just gonna leave one other quick one. When I was growing up in Wisconsin, where I was one of 3 kids of color in my school, and I was treated like I was so Chinese. Like if I could have been more than 100% Chinese, I would have been. And I went to summer camp where we all had to pretend to be Native Americans, and there were 2 kids of color. There was me and there was Tom. Tom was actually Mexican American, but because the other kids didn't know any better, they called him Chinese Tom, and they called me Chinese Stuart. And I could argue, well, I'm only half, but he was like, what the fuck, you people? You really don't know what you're talking about. But what was interesting to me is that over time, for some strange reason, the other kids decided that I was actually okay. So when they decided that, what I noticed is they stopped calling me Chinese Stuart. Suddenly I was just Stuart. And for a while I drew like a life lesson from that, like, oh yeah, I just want to be me, right? But Tom, unfortunately, never became cool, and so to the end of camp, he was Chinese Tom. So I come back to that because it reminds me of how arbitrary these labels are, right? But also, Tom, if you're out there, I want to know your story. And that's what I've loved most about being upstairs, actually, is just talking to all of you. You all have amazing stories. So thank you for bringing us all to life, right here, right now.
Thank you, Stuart. That one kind of got me, Stuart. I have 2 more for you. I think you remember this little girl. Harper. Where? Come on up, Harper. Harper's one of 3 I actually photographed all three of them, but Harper was the one that we put in the book, and Sydney and Milan are here as well. Where are you guys? Wonderful. So Harper, for better or worse, became one of the major recognizable faces of this. And to her credit, when I said, I just want to check with her, she flew out here from Bryn Mawr, where she's going to school. And I said, you know, I'm using your picture up front. She's like, I really don't feel comfortable. I'm like, it's okay. She's like, I don't want people to think that I want this attention. I don't want to feel like I'm representing the face of Hapa. I go, you're not. You're someone we all kind of love as a little kid. It's really simple.
What I said was, I feel weird as someone who, I'm predominantly white. I'm a quarter Japanese, and I, to most people, just look white. And so I was like, that's just another place where white people are just taking something from someone else that could be representative of mixed race Asians. And I didn't want to be the face of that. And Kip was like, shut it down. He was like, that's your millennial guilt. That's not anything. I was like, okay, yes, I have no choice. It's already up there.
There's other people up there now.
Yeah, no, it's not just me.
Okay. Anything, if you've been recognized, anything you want to say about it? If not, I'll tell the story about what happened at USC. Her statement says, like, I'm a person, right? And there's a show called Race, Are We So Different? And it's been going around the country. And part of that exhibit has 16 images from the Hapa Project in there. And I was at Exhibition Park, and people write their own statements, and I saw that someone had copied Harper's statement. It was the same picture and the same statement. And I'm like, who's copying who cheats off a 7-year-old kid? So I went over there to find out who it was to, somehow sleuth it. And I went there, and there's a picture underneath that says, I'm the little kid who wrote this 10 years ago. But it was Harper, so she's okay. Anything else you want to share with us?
Oh, after all that. I don't know, I'm just so glad that this is something I did when I was 5. So I never knew anything different. And that's something, I love seeing all the babies in the book, because that's something that you grow up with. It's like, I can't remember a time when I couldn't just list I'm German, Irish, English, Swedish, Norwegian, and Japanese, off the top of my head. And it's because of being a part of this. And also just another note on the children of if you ask a kid a question, they're going to answer it in the most literal way possible.
And honestly.
Yeah, very honestly. And so I'm so glad that I had a chance to do it when I was a child, and I just had that clear-mindedness of when someone asks you, what are you? It's just well, yeah, I'm a person. Obviously. What do you...
Haven't learned how to filter yet. Thank you, Harper. One more person for you guys. You may recognize him because he was, for better or worse, the face, I'd say for better, of the book. Shane and I was a student of mine. After class one day, I said, Shane, let's try this out. And we took one shot. Okay, and we became surfing buddies later. He surfs 100 times better than I ever will in my best dreams. But Shane Juan Murphy, are you here? Come on up.
Hi, everybody. Excuse me. I wanted to talk a bit about the question we're asked in the book, which is, what are you? And without getting too long-winded, talk to you about how that changed for me throughout the course of my life. When I was young, when I was a little kid, there wasn't a Hapa Project. There wasn't a group to associate myself with in that way. Maybe in Hawaii I would have been able to, but I grew up in California. And I grew up moving a lot. I went to about 13 different schools from preschool through the 12th grade. And I lived in many different neighborhoods, from the San Gabriel Valley to Laguna Beach, beach cities where there wasn't anybody in the town that was full Asian. So for me, what I was, how I identified myself, was with the group that I wanted to be associated with. And so in many ways, I used it to my advantage that I was able to draw on my Caucasian side, or I was able to draw on my Asian side. So in San Gabriel Valley, I was living in Monterey Park. What was I was Asian, and I was with the Asian group because I was the dominant alpha group in the community that I wanted to be associated with. But then in Laguna Beach, I was more like my Caucasian side. So it went that way throughout my life until I went to Hawaii at the age of 16. And in Hawaii, that was the very first time that I saw that, wow, there's this group that's neither Asian nor white. I didn't even know that that group existed. I thought it was just me with all the different places that I lived in. So in Hawaii, I was able to just be something different that I had never done before. I didn't have to choose a side. And soon after that, about 2 years later, I went to UC Santa Barbara. I was Kip's student. We met originally in an art studio class. I think I probably would have never taken an Asian American Studies class if it weren't for you.
Class.
Yeah, so it was that class that then got me interested through the project in exploring that more, and it became very much a passion of mine, and I developed this interest in my background, in my genetic background. Very fortunately, my wife Sarah over there, she's a genetic genealogist. And
She's phenomenal, by the way. She did mine.
Yeah. And so she was able to do some research with me, and I found out that, hey, I'm not what my parents told me I was. That even before that, people are intermingling and doing things and producing and producing people that are mixed within their own realm. So I found out that I'm almost equal parts of 7 different things, and that it's chaos. We don't pull equal quarters from our grandparents. And that's why you have a sibling sometimes that will look different than you. And that I feel like that really comes out often when you have multi-ethnic children that are siblings. So for me, I found out that I was on the Asian side. I was 12% Japanese from my grandmother, who's sitting over there. Momo, raise your hand. And that I pulled a lot from my grandfather's side, actually, and that he's something called North Han, which is a genotype very prominent in Korea and North China, and different from other genotypes in China. And that I'm also 18% Mongolian. A lot of Mongolian there that no one ever told me about. Though if you know me, you probably know that's probably the truth. And then on my dad's side, I was pretty much equal parts of Irish and Swedish, Norman, and then something called Northeast Baltic, which is a North Slavic genotype, very common in the East Baltic Sea area, those coastal countries. So all of this came because of the project, and I started to form and define an identity that I never had earlier in my life. Earlier in my life as a child, I would associate with other commonly known identities, but I never owned something for myself. I always felt like I was borrowing in a way, but not like I was sad about that. It's just I didn't have something to call my own, and I didn't realize that maybe until I explored this with you, and you continued to develop the project. And I can't tell you how much it's meant for me, and it really brings it brought to my life something that I'm very passionate about, which is just my identity and this group, and how fascinating it is. And I love that now outside of Hawaii, it's commonly known, and people like myself have something to associate with. So thank you, Kip.
Thank you, Shane. Thanks so much, Shane. I know there are many more here. I see.
Can I come sit right here?
Go ahead. I know that Curtis is back there. Curtis Rooks. I see you. I see Victoria Namkung. I see Dorna Sakura. I see a lot of you other ones that are in both of these ones. So at the book signing, if you'd like, you could also have these guys sign since they're the real stars. I'd be happy to do it. If not, I want to express my great, great gratitude to these participants and all participants here, to my Gaucho students for coming out, my family, and for all you guys for supporting the Japanese American National Museum. Thank you so much. I love all you guys. Thank you.